Well, I won't tell you the whole Western monarch story because I'm here on a different story. And Genevieve, thank you for your marks on electric drive. How many folks have driven an electric car? How many own one? How many rent one? Well, here in DC, you see a lot of them of every description. And in my blue collar neighborhood, we now have three on my street. For 8 years or something, I was the only one. People come by and say, "Show us what's under that hood again." And but the world's changing, and there is a couple acronyms I want to make sure you're familiar with. One is NEVI, and what I'll ask somebody in the audience, what's NEVI? There we go, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. And this is really about building charging stations across America. And so earlier today, I'm over an appropriations hearing, and it wasn't just a hearing, it was a markup of the transportation spending bill. And I noticed that the NEVI funding was being rated for $250 million to put into other transportation projects. And NEVI, if I recall right, was $15 billion over 5 years. That represented 1/60th of the funds. But the rest of the funds, where are the rest of the funds? They're locked up. They're in impoundment by the administration. So very few funds are getting out now to be filed to the states to build charging stations. I did find it frustrating under President Biden that the funds didn't get out fast in a simple way. I try to drive an electric vehicle. I go to every county in Oregon every year, all 30 counties, most are very rural. And I wanted to go to all of them driving my electric car. No way that can happen. And certainly not on a time schedule when there might be only one charging station with one stall or four, but three of them are broken and you're under a timeline. And I was like, there are 10 cities in Oregon that if we had 10 chargers in it, electric vehicle transportation would explode in my home state. So just give us those NEVI funds and let us build those 10 stations in 10 cities. But largely hasn't happened. I was giving an assistant secretary of transportation for Biden a hard time in a hearing about how slow the rollout was. Pete Buttigieg texted me and said, "Why are you criticizing the slow rollout?" Well, I said, "Because only 7 stations have built, and it's been over 2 years." And he said, "No, there's 8. There's one more that was done last weekend." And now I think I just heard, how many more have been built under NEVI now? We're in the 50s. The goal was to have 500,000 stations across this country, but that included ones that were done outside NEVI as well. So, but still, several hundred thousand. We've kind of stalled out with the bipartisan infrastructure bill saying, let's accelerate our momentum in transitioning to renewable energy. And now Trump's one big beautiful bill, which I refer to as the big ugly betrayal bill, has undone much of that work. Now, back home in Oregon, we have a tremendous amount of impacts from climate change and things that have happened that become visible, really visible in the last 20 years. Dropping snowpack, average snowpack. We had a big snowpack this year, but average snowpack in the Cascades, which means less water for our trout streams, less water for our ranchers and for our farmers, and a whole lot of problems with our forests. Now, back when Ernie Moniz was Secretary of Energy, and a group of us were holding monthly meetings on climate. We'd meet right before the Democratic caucus on Tuesdays. And so Ernie had come to one. He said, "Jeff, I've got to tell you about this study that's coming out of Pacific Northwest." And he said, "I don't know if we'll end up publishing it. It hasn't gone through all its peer review. But essentially, it says by the end of the century, the forests of the Pacific Northwest are gone. Gone because of pine beetles and gone because of fires." Well, as I talk to you right now, we have 6 major fires burning in Oregon. A couple days ago, it was 9 major fires. We've got a couple of them that reduced. Over 60 fires are burning in the state. Last year, we had over 2 million acres burned, the largest ever burn in my home state. As I go to those 36 counties, I'm seeing more and more terrain that I'm driving through that's charred out for us. And on the pine beetle side, what you're talking about is drought that reduces the ability of a pine tree to respond to pine beetles if there's not enough sap to get them. And they started going through 2 reproduction cycles in the summer instead of 1 reproduction cycle. So we're seeing huge, huge impacts. And all of this is very related to why we have to stop putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and why we have to stop putting methane into the atmosphere. And let me turn the clock back to 2015. In 2015, we had Paris. And almost every head of state in the world came together and said, we know it's a problem. We'll do everything we can to tackle this problem. I mean, there were no teeth in the agreement. There were no clear targets. I lobbied for President Obama to lay out 2050 as the absolute, we have to be carbon neutral as humanity on this planet by 2050. That seemed a little aggressive, so I wasn't able to sell that approach. But I put out a bill that basically laid that vision out. We have to accelerate the transition from the world of fossils to the world of renewables. And we have to do it fast. There's an acronym that I use that nobody else uses called ERIE. And ERIE means electrify everything with renewable integrated energy. I threw in integrated just to make sure it matched the word ERIE and make it more memorable, because if we do that and we do that fast, that's climate change. And so we can talk about all the complexities, or we can say to our fellow citizens across the country and citizens of the world, all we have to do is accelerate ERIE, electrify everything with renewable energy. I did up a study, had my team actually do the study. Ben Schreiber is here if any of you want to follow up with my think tank specialist. Ben, where are you? Why don't you stand, wave your flag? Wearing the bright red tennis shoes in the back. I want to borrow them and wear them on the Senate floor and see if I get thrown out or not. We'll do that test. But it is essential we make this happen. Everywhere you look, every part of the country, it may be different effects in different places, but they are extraordinary effects within a single lifetime on this planet, within just a couple decades on this planet. And as for that vision in 2015 at Paris of saying, let's all go home and do our best is not working. We have these 2 worlds. We have less expensive, thank you technology, less expensive clean renewables. We have more expensive dirty fossils. So where's the future? Well, it's with the cleaner, cheaper energy vision. And it's cheaper in the short term as well as the long term. How can you resist that deal? So a couple years ago, I was over in India, and I met with the Energy and Coal Secretary, and we're sitting in his office on a 3rd floor looking out on a street in New Delhi. And I said, so I know you have this plan for all these 40 additional coal plants, but what does it cost to do a new kilowatt of electric energy here in India? He said about 4 cents a kilowatt. And I said, how much for a new kilowatt of coal energy? He said about 7 cents a kilowatt energy. I said, so the renewables are cheaper. And he's like, absolutely, absolutely cheaper. And I said, that's before we talk about what's outside your window. And so he looks outside his window, but he can't see anything. Why? Because the coal pollution in New Delhi is so bad that at times you can't see a couple houses down the street, a couple buildings down the street. And I said, the healthcare impact of that pollution in your air is extraordinary. He's like, absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I said, so we got the cheaper fuel, renewable energy, even before we take into account the health costs. So why not absolutely throw yourself into that battle? And he said, the acceleration of manufacturing. We need extensive base load energy so our cities can be manufacturing hubs. That's why. It's too hard to get enough kilowatts for manufacturing operation. Well, okay, that is a challenge. And that brings us into the battery storage situation. And as mentioned, even the car batteries start to become part of the battery storage situation, or pump storage, or other technologies, key set of technologies. But we cannot let that stop us. We have to quit building new coal plants. You know what? There's this Development Finance Corporation. Development Finance Corporation, we are, as a nation, investing in overseas projects. We are investing in more fossil projects overseas under Biden than renewable energy projects. That's nuts. I mean, even if you're just supporting fossils from the US, do you want to finance your competitor overseas? So we have an economic as well as an energy reason to say that that's not the right thing to do. So why are we trapped in this? And that brings me to my third story, Mar-a-Lago. During his campaign, down there in Mar-a-Lago, Trump proceeded to meet with 20 fossil fuel executives, and he said, get me $1 billion for the campaign, and I will get you all kinds of provisions to accelerate fossil energy. That is fundamental corruption of our system. The Supreme Court has said, if I give you, and you're running for office, money, I can meet limits on it. Right now, it's $7,000 per election, and full disclosure that the whole world knows I gave it to you. But if I give it to your friend who will run a parallel campaign and do all the dirty work of smearing your opponent, I can give unlimited sums secretly. That's why we call it dark money. Sometimes the funds are not given secretly because the people behind it want to send a message. Look at the last Senate campaign in Ohio. The crypto world did not like that Sherrod Brown wanted to regulate crypto and stop money laundering and keep it from being used in arms sales and drug sales and terrorist operations. So what'd they do? They gave $40 million and publicized it in a U.S. Senate race. And now Sherrod Brown is gone. And it's a whole different world in the Senate Banking Committee. Well, that's the problem we have with this transition to renewable energy. So if we're going to fight to save the planet, we have to fight for integrity in our politics, and we have to reverse, at least have disclosure for the dark money. When I was running in my first reelection, the Koch brothers decided to come to Oregon and take me out. And so everywhere there were ads smearing me, everywhere. And I said to my team, the Koch brothers are bragging about running this. I'm going to put up an ad attacking them. And my team was said, oh my goodness, you cannot do that. Are you kidding me? They have more power than God, more money than God. They may have done 5 million. They could do 50 million. Don't do it. I said, here's the ad we're going to write. It's going to say, out of state, oil and coal billionaires, the Koch brothers, they've come to Oregon. They have these 3 policy goals, which my opponent had all signed on to. Great investment for them, terrible choice for us. And the video that the team did was great, just all skullduggery going on. And you know what? They bailed out. They bailed out of Oregon. And Harry Reid, the majority leader, tried to get 3 of my colleagues to take on the same smear campaign coming from the Koch brothers. They all decided not to because their staff said they're too scary. The fossil money's too scary. They all lost. So part of this discussion I'll just leave you with is we have to be champions for the planet because of what climate chaos is doing and how hard it is to get carbon dioxide and methane out of the environment, particularly carbon dioxide. But we have to be champions for democracy with integrity if we're going to counter the greed that is destroying the only planet we have. Thank you all very much, and take care.